6 and 7 figures a year, in 2006, 2007. And then in the middle of 2008, an atomic bomb struck them, and they've been losing money every month since then. Now, I think that's par for the course here in Ireland, that because there's been a contraction in demand, is that, whether you're a pub business, whether you're a motor business, whether you're you're a service business, people have got less income and they're losing money.
You very obviously still have faith in the Irish banks, particularly in the big two, because you've been buying into them. We know that because you made that statement, or you had a statement made at the board meeting, at the shareholders meeting at Bank of Ireland recently.
Well, I bought them. Basically, it's what I took a view is that it's really option money, because the price went so low that I said to myself is that this is an option that if they do turn around, that I will.
It's just when you mention the banks, the lights go out.
This looks like a sign I might lose my money. but no, I think that if you're going to have a successful economy, you've got to have a very competitive banking structure. And what created a successful economy here in the last 20 years is you had the banks competing. And what happened is that they over-competed at the end of it. So with Anglo competing in the marketplace, it really sent the wind up AIB and Bank of Ireland, and they all had to compete, generate new products, provide credit. Now, they went overboard, and they made mistakes. But that's got to be restored to balance. And you need a strong banking structure. You need the Ulster banks, and you need the Bank of Ireland, you need the AIBs to succeed if you want to restore this economy. If the banks, personally, in my view, if the banks are nationalised, I think that our economy is in dire straits for several decades, because I think that any quango that's been created by government has shown to be inefficient, and there's been political interference, there's been skullduggery, there's been cronyism, and I think it would be an utter disaster. Now, I think it's a disaster the way the banks are in at the present time, but I think we should find a solution that fits an Irish problem, not import a solution that fits a Swedish problem when they had their own exchange rate, the interest rates were 80%. Remember now, interest rates are very low. Now, to hold something on for 5 years at these interest rates is very cheap. Now, I remember when I bought the building, or I had the building down here in FSC in 91, 92, 93, that I was paying 28% 1 month money. Now, for 1 week, I can hold my properties without a margin. I can hold them for 5 years. For 1 week, while 1 month, it cost me 28% then, and that was interest rates at that period. So to say we're very fortunate, so we've got to use the interest rate, the low interest rate, we've got to use the time value of money to help us get out of this problem. And we will get out of the problem. They're not insurmountable.
How do we avoid that nationalisation that you think is so dire, such an awful solution?
Well, first of all, I think that any bad debts that the banks may incur on property over the next 3 or 4 years, they'll make enough profit, I think, over the next 5 years to meet any of those losses. So all the banks need is time to make provisions for those losses without government intervention. Now, it's a very simple case analogy. If I asked you to sell your house or your property or whatever you had tomorrow morning, you wouldn't like it if you were forced to do it or take a write off of it, because you'd say there's no market there. The same applies with the banking market. You can't expect the banks to sell their assets or their property assets tomorrow morning to NAM or anything else, because there's no market there. Who's going to be right? Who's going to pick the right price? Now, do I think the taxpayers should pick up the tab for the banks? Absolutely not. I think the shareholders, their money should be extinguished, first of all, before the taxpayer even gets involved. And I think that what the process that I would see is that you'd put the banks, and you'd isolate their doubtful development loans in the bank, and declare it to everybody else, and let the banks make provision over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. And then after 3 or 4 years, let's see is there a market there, and see what the assets are worth.
Sit on them.
And sit them, and then determine what share the bank should take or not share. And if the market did turn around, you wouldn't be taking a share. If the market didn't turn around, well, then you have a good idea what provisions to take.
What happens to the fellas then that owe the money to the banks in that situation?
The fellas that owe the bank, they should not get a bob. They should pay their interest, and even delinquent interest rate, that our penal interest rate should be put in. They should not get anything until everything's repaid back to the bank and repaid for any government subvention. And I believe the government should get paid. If the government decides to guarantee any monies to the banks, whether in this special funding, they should get paid by the banks. It shouldn't be a free meal for the banks. So I'm just advocating what the government says to the banks. Don't foreclose on your mortgage or whatever the case is. Give them people time to get a new job, etc. I'm saying really the same thing about the government saying to the banks. Give them time to resolve the problems until the market turns into equilibrium. But if you act in an impetuous manner and you look for a solution today, there's no solution today because there's no market. I wouldn't sell any property today. I couldn't even sell a business today, even if it was making profit, because there's not people around there that haven't got the money. The banks won't give them the money to buy the business. But it won't be always dark at 5 o'clock in the evening, and things will turn around.
And just going back to those property developers who've borrowed 500 million from the bank, say that's what they're in a hole for. One guy in a hole for that much money. His asset now is worth 250 million. Do you believe that he should be pursued relentlessly for the 500?
But there's property developers, my understanding, there's probably billions around the various banks. Now, you can't get blood out of a stone. You can pursue all you like, but you won't get it. If you want to get the maximum value for that property, the best people are going to get it are going to be the bankers, because they know all about the property, and they'll want to get the maximum value because they'll want to have the least amount of loss on that, and they'll know who to get. Now, whether those property developers will ever get any equity out of it or will get anything. Now, we don't know whether some of them have given guarantees or not, because it seems to be the practice around that most loans were given without personal guarantees. So you can't pursue somebody if they haven't given a personal guarantee. But I would imagine that in this environment, no bank would be allowed, if they've got a personal guarantee or some form of that security, without pursuing that security to the fullest.
Right. You mentioned banks going too far down the road of competition and trying to outdo each other in the good times, which seem so far away now as we sit here. One person who was at the forefront of that with Bank of Ireland is now chief executive of that bank. And you have said quite publicly through your representative that Richie Boucher shouldn't be in that job. Do you still hold firm with that view? I think that anybody, and I think that's for the boards of all the banks, without exception, that have suffered are suffering major losses, or potential major losses, that their mandate for reappointment should go before the shareholders in block, and nobody should have been appointed that has been a director or been promoted when they have been participate in the demise or the potential demise of an institution. And that goes for AIB, Bank of Ireland, whoever, Nationwide, whoever the case is. No. Do you think that he drove their policy to go overboard, as you say?
Well, I don't know. He had responsibility, for my understanding, and it's public record, he had responsibility for some of the approval of the development and land loans. Now, to say, I think all responsibility in every organisation is collective. Now, you can't have somebody, say, Governor of Bank of Ireland, promoting somebody that was in the same club when there has been diminution of value. So it needs independent. If somebody came along and said there was a new board appointed to Bank of Ireland, or AIB, our new board members, and they said, well, we think Richie Boucher is definitely the best person to run this bank and get the maximum value for shareholders and all stakeholders, but then I would go along with that. I would go along with that independence. And the same with AIB. But I can't agree with somebody that has participated in that little circle of decision making being promoted by that same circle.